Sarah says that at one point, she agreed to take her brother Ben off of her mother Stacy's hands. But Sarah says she quickly learned Ben was not exactly an ideal roommate, so back to mom he went. Now, Stacy says a lot of her patience and generosity towards Ben comes from the guilt that she has over his childhood.
I have always been there for Ben when he's needed me, and I've always protected him. He's been rejected by everyone, except for his grandmother and myself. Because Ben had ADHD, he was totally misunderstood. I remember him crying himself to sleep when he was in kindergarten because no one would play with him. It breaks your heart.
My mom does make up excuses for why she chooses to enable my brother. She says it's out of guilt because he's had a rough lot in life. He has ADHD, so she overcompensates by continuously letting him maintain this bad behavior.
This child has been up against insurmountable things in his life. Ben experienced abuse from his father. He was thrown against the wall. His father would be grabbing him around the neck, throwing him onto the ground. I felt if I contacted CPS, they'd take all 3 of my children and I'd never get them back. Because Ben was constantly being abused, I had to get him into a boarding school. While Ben was at boarding school, they were doing horrendous things to him. They starved him, made him eat alone, and they would all gang up and beat him up. My intentions were good, but in the end, it just really ripped my heart out that I'd sent him to a torture chamber.
Ben brought up the boarding school countless times. He's brought up my dad and the abuse that he endured. When he's doing this, my mom sits there and takes it. She cries because she thinks that she deserves it.
My brother takes advantage of that.
The guilt is overwhelming. I have guilt all the time. I feel like I'm the only one that did this to him. I really do. I wish I could go back and redo it, and his life would be different, and he'd be a different kid.
Okay, listen, I'm very sorry that that happened to Ben. Look, clearly what happened to him had an impact, right? It leaves you with a void.
Absolutely.
And so what do? You have to fill that void. But let me ask you something. Let's say you had an infant, and this infant was crawling along here, and the infant saw a toy they wanted, and so they started maybe for the first time to go, oh, wow, I can kind of get up and stand up. Would you come along and say, no, stay down, let me get the toy, and I'll give it to you?
Absolutely not.
And then if they were crawling along and they saw something they wanted to eat and it was up on a little child-safe shelf and they started to pull themselves up, would you go, no, here, you stay on the floor, I'll put it down here so you don't have to pull yourself up? You wouldn't do that, would you?
Absolutely not.
Then why are you doing it with your son now? You're not requiring him to pull himself up to get what he wants. You're not requiring him to stand up like a man and do what he needs to do, which you wouldn't do to an infant. You would require more from an infant crawling on the floor than you are from your... Doug, help me out.
Ben needs to stand on his 2 feet. He's, 32 years old, soon to be 33, and the enabling needs to stop, and he needs to grow up.
And my theory is you're doing that to make yourself feel better, not to help Ben. And that is a selfish thing to do.
Yeah.
The hell with you. I want to feel better today, so I'm going to buy you how many cars?
6, 7.
7 cars. And what's happened to those cars?
Some were crashed, some were sold, one was on fire.
He's destroyed them all.
They've been destroyed.
Dr. Phil, he's never had a car for more than a year.
Is there something I'm missing?
I guess I don't want him to fail or hurt anymore. And I didn't see it as something that was selfish on my part. I don't want him to hurt.
Do you have a story or a question for me? Click the link in the description and tell me what in the world is going on.